Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to Build. Our next guest is breakout country star Caroline Jones. She is out on the road with Zac Brown Band as well as Jimmy Buffett. And if that wasn't enough, she also has a brand new record called Bare Feet. Miss Caroline Jones, how are you?
Thank you. I'm great.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm a big fan of this series. I've been watching it.
She actually is. She says that she watches these all the time. That's great.
I do. I love long-form interviews.
Yes, I love that. You're literally between tour dates with Zac Brown Band and Jimmy Buffett. We've got a tour with Kip Moore coming out. We've got all this music, and we're going to get to all that. But I want to rewind a little bit, growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut. When did music find you, or did you find music and you said, this is, I think, what I'm going to pursue?
Well, I actually started writing poetry and short stories at a really young age. As soon as I learned to read, I would just write all day. And when I was 9 years old, I asked my parents for singing lessons. And I got really into Celine Dion when I was really young, and so I wanted to sing like her. And when I began singing lessons, I was trained classically in opera and jazz. But when I started singing, I realized a couple years after that that I could put all those poems and all those stories to music. And after that, I never wanted to do anything else. Yeah. Was
your family musical, or was this sort of an odd sort of interest for a young girl?
I wouldn't say odd, but my family is not musical. They love music. My dad grew up in Memphis, so he's really into classic R&B and classic rock, and my mom's Australian, so she was really into ABBA and Barbra Streisand and the divas of the 90s. You know, some of the best vocalists ever came from the 90s, Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey and Luther Vandross, and so I had an eclectic mix, none of which was country, by the way. But yeah, no one in my family does music, plays instruments or anything like that.
That's so interesting. What do they think? I mean, it's not every parent's dream when their daughter wants to become a rock star. Right. When you sort of vocalized these desires, was it support all the way? Was there a little bit of worry? Like, what road is she headed down? How did they take it?
I think a mix. The mix is always well-intended. I think the biggest fear for a parent is wanting to shield their child from disappointment and rejection, which is the hallmark of the music industry. Like, welcome to the music industry, be rejected for 10 years straight or whatever, you know? So that part is difficult for a parent. I think looking back now, I can see that. But when you have a dream, nobody can deter you, and they wouldn't have wanted to.
I think for anybody who follows the country music genre, Greenwich, Connecticut native is something that is not heard very frequently. When did you arrive on country music? And in the same turn, do you feel like anybody from your hometown is that attuned to what you're doing?
Yeah, I have a lot of support from my hometown. They came out to the shows this weekend. A bunch of people from my hometown came out to the shows this weekend at Citi Field with Zac Brown Band and OneRepublic. The way I got introduced to country music was when I was 17, I'd been writing songs and making demos here in New York and commuting back and forth to school. And my manager at the time said, you know, there's some country sensibility in your songwriting. I really think you would enjoy Nashville. You should go down there and meet some writers and producers. And I was a little flummoxed because I'd never really listened to country music, but I went down to Nashville and I just discovered this community down there of people who had the same passion and desire as I did. And I went to a show at the Bluebird Cafe. I don't know if you guys know, the Bluebird Cafe is a legendary singer-songwriter venue. And it's literally like this. We'll have guitars and you're the audience, and people just tell the stories behind these songs that they've written that have been on the radio and been huge hits for Garth Brooks or Trisha Yearwood or Faith Hill. And hearing the stories behind those songs and hearing those songwriters capture the hearts of an audience with just their guitar and their voice and nothing else, no bells and whistles, no production, was really transformative for me. And I just fell in love with the genre. And I became a student of it. I became obsessed with it, and I delved back to the founders of the genre, which are the Carter family, and Hank Williams and Jimmy Rogers. And I started listening and went forward in time from there and fell in love with Hank Williams and Emmylou Harris and Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson and Vince Gill and Keith Urban. And it just made its way into my songwriting. It was kind of the missing piece of what my style would become.
Dierks Bentley said something really interesting earlier this year. He released a record called The Mountain, and he is also not from Nashville or the South, and he's a country music artist. And he said, you know, he can't fall back on that hometown vibe or the lyrics about growing up in the South and the American South. So it makes him work a little bit harder to find lyrics to write and stories to tell. Do you feel like you relate to that on some level, just sort of being physically an outsider to Nashville?
Well, you know, I've always just trusted and had faith in my taste and my vision for myself, because I think what a true artist is completely unique. Like if you take Willie Nelson or you take Dolly Parton or you take Hank Williams, there's only one of them. Like there will never be another. So I've always felt like my job as an artist was just to craft and polish that thing that I am. And I feel like I'll spend my whole life doing that. But I've never really felt any pressure or even desire to try to cater to what country is or what people in Nashville think is a good song or a commercial song. I've just kind of soaked up all that I loved from country music and kind of let it inform me as an artist.
Let's fast forward a little bit to Bare Feet.
Yeah.
When you realized that you were really plotting out this record, what were your goals for the collection? What did you hope to accomplish?
Well, it evolved because originally I teamed up with my co-producer Ric Wake for this record 3 years ago, and we thought it was going to be like an acoustic singer-songwriter record.
It's not.
It's not. It's not. And so it ended up taking a year to make because the production started getting bigger and bigger. And when you layer a lot of production over like acoustic guitars, things start to get a little messy. I'm speaking a little bit technically now, but it ended up taking a long time to craft this sound and to really blend the country and pop elements that I wanted to blend. And because I love big production and I love electronic pop elements, but I'd never really built that from the ground up. And I played most of the instruments on this record. So it was really a trial and error learning process with me and a very small team, Gustavo Celis, who recorded and mixed the album, Ric Wake, who co-produced it, and he's produced Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston and Celine Dion, and then Jorge Stelling, who teched the record. It was just us four, basically, and Nir Zidkiahu and Glenn Worf played bass and drums. They're Nashville Titans. And so it took a lot longer than we expected, but like Bare Feet is a perfect example. Like I was walking in and I felt the 808s coming out from that's not typical to country music, and the synths and the arpeggiators mixed with mandolin and banjo and acoustic guitar and dobro. And so that's a real challenge to blend the electronic and organic worlds in a production, but it's a challenge that I really love to take on.
I'm curious because clearly there was a very set out idea for how this was going to sound. How do you know when you should continue sort of chasing that muse and letting it evolve into something different, as opposed to saying, no, we came here to do an acoustic album. We should definitely do an acoustic record.
It's just a gut feeling, it's just an intuition. And again, being able to trust the people around you on your team, that they also understand your vision and respecting their perspective. Like Ric has an incredible perspective that's so different than mine. I tend to be super detail-oriented, into minutia, sometimes to the detriment of the landscape of the production. And he really has that forest for the trees thing, And you just know. I can't explain how you know when something's done. It's just a feeling. I have a song called Chasin' Me that some of my fans will know because I've been playing it live, but it's not out yet, and we're just recording it right now. And last week we just gutted it and completely re-recorded it because it just wasn't right. I can't explain it. You just know when it's not right. It's the same as editing videos. Like I know that shot's not right. I know there's a better one. Or if there's not, we'll shoot it,
We'll
it's
go find
art.
it. Exactly.
We got to get it right, yeah.
Prior to this record, you self-released a number of records in fairly quick succession. I'm curious, are you always writing? Is it just that anything can sort of spark an idea and it's all on your notepad on your iPhone? Or do you really need to set aside, say, Tuesday afternoon is for songwriting, no one bother me?
No, writing is more in charge of me than I'm in charge of writing. And I've always been that way. I'm extremely disciplined and schedule-oriented when it comes to practicing my vocal regimen, my instrumental regimen, my rehearsals, my production rehearsals, all that kind of stuff. I'm extremely disciplined, but with writing, I just let it come, let it go. I've been like that since I was a little kid. Like, things will just pop into my head. If I try to write, I find it uninspired, completely uninspired. But I write less now than I used to. I'm more picky now about ideas, and I think I know myself better if an idea is really worth fleshing out. When I was a teenager, I would write 300 songs a year. And the best of those became those self-produced and self-released records that you're referring to. And that was such a time of learning for me, how to produce, how to write. And I was doing it all by myself. I didn't even have a manager and agent. So I learned a lot, from trial and error.
I want to talk about Tough Guys. It's a song on this record. Aside from just being a really killer song to listen to, it's also really where you sort of got a lot of attention on the national level. Tell me about writing it and when you noticed that other people were listening to it.
Well, Tough Guys, I wrote one morning. I just worked out, and you know how you kind of feel jacked up after you work out sometimes? So I thought of that play on words, tough guys, and then tough, comma, guys. And I was like, that's so sassy. I can't believe no one's ever written that. Like, you Google it, and you're like, is there a song with that play on words? Because Nashville's very famous for the plays on words, and everyone's trying to find the play on words that has never been written. So I was kind of off and running after that, and I think when you're charting your own path and when you're an artist, when you choose to be in a business like this, you really have to develop a sense of self, a sense of identity, and a confidence in that, because there's a lot of people who second guess you or think that you should do it their way, and then these people think you should do it their way. And if you listen to that, you won't have an identity as an artist. And you might be successful, but you won't be fulfilled. So that's what that song is about. It's just about, I'm going to be myself whether you like it or not. And we had early support from SiriusXM on that song, which I'm really grateful for. SiriusXM has been really supportive of me. I've had a show on their Coffee House channel for 5 years, and they've been wonderful to me. And we got some early support from CMT, too, Leslie Fram. So
I'm curious, when you think about a song like that, the narrative that has surrounded country music for a lot of the last several years has been its support or lack thereof of young female artists trying to break through. The tomatoes of the genre, sort of trying to find a way onto tours, onto the radio airwaves, all these things. I'm curious, when you talk about how people are trying to pressure people into becoming other artists, is that something you experienced where you were just saying, I have to go do this on my own because I can't possibly fit into your lane?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced that, but to be honest, I've never assumed that it was because of my sex. Like, I've always taken it and just said to myself that my music and my craft will speak for itself. So, it's just a matter of time if I really dedicate myself to my craft. I think that assuming it's because of your sex or your genre can sometimes disempower you to be putting your power and your future in the hands of other people. And there are other people in the music industry who have decisions to be made and can be very powerful decisions. But I think in the end, it really comes down to the quality of your music. And when I look at a Zac Brown playing for 2 hours on stage, the musicianship, the craftsmanship, the songwriting, the singing, their harmonies, the connection, it's just undeniable. And those talents will rise to the top every single time. So I just have faith in that, and I don't think too much. I'm really lucky. I was born in a family where it never occurred to me that I was at a disadvantage because I was a woman. And I think just that mental attitude is half the battle,
I want to talk a little bit more about Zac Brown Band and some of the other major tours you've been on. We were even just saying in the back, Tim and Faith, Jimmy Buffett, the Eagles, all of these are ridiculously large crowds. Yeah. The first time you stood in front of that room, were you sort of shaking on stage? Was it crazy? Or were you thinking, this is exactly right, I should definitely be here?
A little bit of both. I visualize those kind of crowds all the time when I'm rehearsing, and I've been doing that for years. I think that's really important, the visualization of that scope and that energy. But certainly you have adrenaline when you perform. I mean, it just hits you. You can't really control it. And actually, I get much more adrenaline performing my own songs than, say, joining Zac Brown or Jimmy Buffett on stage, even though it's in front of 50,000 people, and my set, there might be 10 or 20 there. But I think that it was a really surreal moment the first time that I performed with Zac Brown, because it just happened so organically and serendipitously that he heard my music, asked me to come out, and then on the third night of the tour, he said, "Do you want to sing a song with me on stage?" And
You said no.
yeah, I was like,
not.
I have to go to bed. And so I went to his bus, and he said, "What song do you want to sing?" And my favorite Zac Brown song is "Tomorrow Never Comes." And I was like, "Can we do "Tomorrow Never Comes"? And so we worked it out, and then I find myself singing a song on stage with Zac Brown that, like, I've sung so many times in the mirror to myself. Like, it gives me goosebumps even now, like in the mirror, just imagining myself in front of that many people. So that was a literal dream come true. So that was surreal.
When you look at all of those productions and the different way that all of those tours are run, I mean, Tim and Faith is a true machine. Jimmy Buffett is, he's in his 70s. He's like been doing this for a while. Zac Brown Band is a huge production. You know, what have you learned from watching them command that huge ship?
Well, it really goes back to the authenticity and the uniqueness of being a singular artist. Like, there is no other Jimmy Buffett. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one can even come close. And exactly what you're talking about. I went on the Tim and Faith tour, and their visuals and their lighting and the cues and the tracks, and it's just astounding. And they have a huge band and a huge stage, and it's an incredible production. And it was so different than what I'd seen with Jimmy, who just goes on in his bare feet and has an amazing visuals, amazing band, but it's much more organic. He'll call songs on the fly all the time. He talks to the audience. And so it's a completely different vibe, but both of their audiences are completely loyal to the artists that they love, that they're a fan of. And so it just goes to show that if you just do your thing and stick with it and do it the best you can, 100% authentically and with excellence, that people will show up, that people will become fans.
Your partnership with Jimmy Buffett obviously extends off stage. I think it was at a benefit concert that you guys ended up accidentally singing together that even kicked off being signed to his label. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so Jimmy's manager, I've known for a little bit. He introduced me to Mac McAnally a few years ago, who, if you don't know, is a Hall of Fame songwriter and singer and member of Jimmy Buffett's band. And he's a legendary session player and producer in Nashville. And so he really took me under his wing in 2012. And so I'd known their camp peripherally for a few years, and then Mike came to see me on the Zac Brown tour last year. Mike is Jimmy's manager, sorry. And asked me to open this benefit that Jimmy was doing for hurricane relief. You know, remember Irma and all that happened so close together last year. So Jimmy has a place in his heart, obviously, for the islands. And so was putting together this benefit with him and Kenny Chesney, Toby Keith, and Jake Owen. And so I opened that, and on that night, they asked me to come sing with Jimmy a few songs, which in itself was such a prize, but we ended up just really hitting it off. And he became a supporter and a mentor and a friend. And I just kept playing shows with them and joined him on New Year's Eve and was asked on the tour. And so it was just really organic and made sense that he would distribute my album, Bare Feet, which is what has now happened. And it's wonderful to have him as a partner and him as a mentor and a friend, because he's not only obviously an incredible and authentic singer and songwriter, but he's a great role model as a person, and he's also an incredible businessman and entrepreneur. And I think those three things are important to be nowadays as an artist.
And then before we wrap, I'm just curious, what are the goals that are still lying on the horizon? More music, different tours, anything huge that you want to accomplish before the end of the year?
Well, whenever anyone asks me my goal is always to continue deepening and improving my craft. So my crafts are singing, songwriting, and being a musician, playing instruments. And I feel like those crafts are ones that I'll continue to refine and polish for the rest of my life. And honestly, I just want to be making records and touring for the rest of my life. Like, if I can do that, I'm so happy. Obviously, there are lots of goals that I have in mind, but really I'm just blessed to be playing music, and it's my passion, and I'm happy if I'm on stage in front of people.
That's amazing. Yeah. And then we actually have a couple questions from the audience that we're going to take.
Hi.
I really love your energy and what you had to say about just music. I wanted to ask, so how has starting with classical music really shaped you with your discipline and singing, and the technique has I guess, progressed you to keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and one that I don't get enough, because I think it's so important to have some sort of foundation. Like if you're an athlete, you have some sort of foundation of technique, and being a vocalist is being an athlete, and a lot of people aren't taught how to take care of their voices and take care of themselves, and they're overscheduled and they don't necessarily sing correctly, so even though they have a lot of raw talent, they end up burning out their voice. And I would say the biggest thing is the foundation of the technique of warming up. Like I warm up for an hour before I sing anything every day. And so that alone creates so much dynamic flexibility and range flexibility in my voice, so it allows me to sing better, but it also allows me to take care of my voice. And also, singing opera and jazz gave me an appreciation for harmonic variety, which isn't always in pop and country music. And I don't necessarily write with a ton of harmonic variety, but just having that background allows me to be freer melodically, and who knows where my writing will go, right? I'll be doing a jazz record next. So I would say those two things. And then lastly, I would say just an appreciation for various textures of instruments, like string sections and horn sections and classical percussion and things like that are kind of sprinkled here and there throughout my music, like very subtly. But I love all that stuff. Yeah.
That's great. And then we have one more.
Hi, this is going to be an online question.
Yeah.
Jackie would like to know, are there any favorite venues that you've performed in so far or would like to perform in?
Hi, Jackie. Yeah, I've performed in a lot of cool venues. We just did 2 days at Citi Field with Zac Brown Band and OneRepublic. They're two of my favorite bands. The Hollywood Bowl is an iconic venue that I got to play with Zac Brown last year. And then we played at this really cool venue in Ohio with Jimmy called Blossom Music Center. And I just have you can't explain it. Some nights on tour are just magical. I don't know why. They're all wonderful and they're all special, and I feel blessed every night to be up there, but some of them just have an extra spark and you don't know why. And that was one of those, the Blossom Music Center. Shout out, Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio.
I love that. Yeah. That's all we have for today. You guys, Caroline Jones is going to be on the road for many months. Definitely check that out. And Bare Feet is out now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madison. Thanks, guys.